Good evening and welcome to Hands Up, the Conversation. Tonight's event is hosted by Willam Mary's Department of Theater and Dance, and I'm Dr. Monica Griffin, Director of Engaged Scholarship and the Sharp Community Scholars Program at Willam Mary. I will serve as tonight's moderator. About Hands Up, 7 Playwrights, 7 Testaments. The New Black Fest commissioned 7 emerging Black playwrights to write 10 to 15-minute monologues that explore their feelings about the well-being of Black people in a culture of institutional profiling. These stories examine the civic discord around equity and civil rights that continues in today's global protests, incited by the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many more. Hands Up, the Conversation is an invitation to join a conversation with actors, directors, alumni, and others, some from Willam Mary and others from neighboring universities and partnerships, who engaged in a deeply personal, often complicated artistic and professional process intended to produce the play and then decided not to perform it. We will begin this evening with a few brief excerpts from Hands Up, 7 Playwrights, 7 Testaments, featuring the cast of Willam Mary Theater's intended production. As a content warning, some of the following excerpts contain graphic descriptions of police violence against Black people and expressions of emotional anguish. The excerpts will continue for the next 10 to 15 minutes and will conclude when I appear back on the screen to welcome our first set of panelists.
Hello, my name is Nelson Soga, and I will be performing Superiority Fantasy by Nathan James. I am tired, feeling like something grotesque. Every race of people have sociopaths who do horrible things. And I am tired of taking responsibility for the individual Black men who chose to live like animals, while white boys are not being treated like they could potentially shoot up an elementary school with an AR-15. I don't give a damn whether white people believe these stories or not. These things happen. You can justify it however you want. This shit doesn't happen to white men. And it is so annoying to sit in on a job and hear people having things to say about something they know absolutely nothing about. People act like racism is just some huge dragon that lives up in the hills of the Deep South. Racism is just a fantasy of superiority. It is a bedtime story that America told its children over and over again, and they forgot to tell them it was all a lie. It is a lie that America doesn't want to wake up from, because it is a lie that has become convenient. And because white people have never experienced the lower end of the stick of racism, they can't fully recognize when it is and isn't happening. Yet they always have something to say about whether or not it still exists. The victim blaming of unarmed Black bodies shows that white people aren't tired of racism. White people are tired of talking about racism.
Hello, my name is Dwight Merritt, and I will be performing a piece from Holes in My Identity by Nathan Youngerberg. And then a woman, a white woman, sitting straight ahead. I'm giving her a qualifier because she went out of her way to announce that she was Italian. She spoke about getting stopped and frisked by airport security several times, 4 to be exact. She spoke about the intense humiliation as they rifled through her belongings, and she talked about feeling like a criminal. She said on the 4th occasion, she asked them why she was singled out, and they told her because she fit a profile. And then she said, everybody gets singled out at least once in their life. It's not about race, we all go through it. And then my voice leapt forth from my chest before I had a chance to catch it. Well, are you fucking serious? Oh my God, did I really just say that? What we're talking about here is consistency, repetitive profiling, constant harassment, consistency. And what you're talking about is so dismissive. And she asked me to explain how she was being dismissive. Because when you're talking about the issue of race, you can't just say we all go through the same thing. Because we don't. And she said she was just trying to have an honest discussion about race. And she wasn't trying to dismiss anyone's feelings. Dismissal steps quietly.
Good evening. My name is Antonio Del Word, and I will be performing They Shootin' or I Ain't Never Scared by Idris Goodwin. After my performance, a young high schooler asked me, does it always have to be about race? I'd love to say absolutely not. That I ignore the fact that the middle-aged lady in Kentucky who said colored people mistook me for the other Black guy in the room. I want to be eternally hopeful. The young high school student just asked me if it had to be about race. And I really want to say, from henceforth, I will stop cataloging the crimes of white people, stop writing about the dead and martyred for the sake of the children and for their future. But that's not what I'm going to say. I will say yes. None of this is theoretical. The skin is real. The skin is a passport. It can be revoked, stamped, expired. It can be broken. The skin is the body's largest organ. Young man, it's always about race. Because I helped create a child in a wilderness that devours Black. This wild that waits right now, ready to tunnel through the air at skin-shattering velocity. I am full of theories, and I see boogeymen. But the thing is, they're real. So every day, I wake up with curled fists, squeezing the life out of hope. It's about race because I am here at your all-white school to present my diverse perspective. Because your school paid me to do so. Because they were given a grant to promote such activity. Why? Why am I here today, if not to talk to you about race?
Hello, my name is Chadwick Saint, and I will be performing Abortion by Nsengu Njika. Now, this next lesson is serious, very serious. When you're at a party and they say, throw your hands in the air and wave them like you just don't care, you better do that shit. Do that all the time. Your hands should go up and stay there. Wave them around like you just don't care because in that moment, in that one tiny space of a moment, you will know what freedom feels like. And man, that is an addictive feeling. All right, eyes closed. Hands making the air move and become like wind. Feet planted firmly in the spirit of not giving a fuck. That is freedom. And don't let nobody tell you otherwise. In fact, don't let nobody tell you nothing without you investigating it for yourself.
Hi, my name is Aaron Tyler, and I will be performing a piece from How I Feel by Dennis A. Allen II. No one can do it. No one can keep his or her hands held up forever, and this bullshit fantasy isn't the answer either. I am human. And I shouldn't have to keep my hands held high to prove it. And time again, keeping our hands held high hasn't gotten us treated like humans should be treated. I will not allow you to take away my humanity. Every time you tell me not to be angry, that I'm too aggressive, that I shouldn't be out at night, that I shouldn't wear a hoodie, and that I need to pull up my pants, when I drop to the ground and allow you to handcuff me, you shoot me anyway. When you put me in the back of your paddy wagon and break my neck anyway, fuck you. Fuck you for not feeling how I feel. Fuck you for shutting down because I'm using strong language. You indiscriminately killing me is a display of your power. Me giving 0 fucks if you kill me is an exercise of mine.
We seem to be having a few technical difficulties with Scott's audio sound. So what I would like to invite us to do is to move into the first part of our conversation and invite panelists to talk about how they arrived at this moment, what inspired the department to choose this piece, what were the original intentions and hope for the production of Hands Up. And I'd like to remind our attendees that you are also invited to enter questions in the Q&A link or box that's at the bottom of the screen. You'll see it's different than the chat. The Q&A is a section where we'll answer questions at the end of tonight's conversation. Can I invite the panelists to join me?
Hello, everyone. My name is Keaton Hillman. I was a graduate of Willam Mary in 2016, and I directed Superiority Fantasy.
Good evening, everyone. I am Omiyemi Artisha Green. I'm an associate professor of theater and Africana Studies, and I'm the program director for Africana Studies. And I directed Dead of Night, The Execution of, and They Shootin' or I Ain't Never Scared.
Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Elizabeth Wiley from Theater, Speech, and Dance, and I directed Holes in My Identity by Nathan Youngerberg.
Hello, my name is Nelson Soga, and I am a sophomore here at the College of Willam Mary, and I played Nathan in Superiority Fantasy.
So, in May 2020, a cohort of Willam & Mary students petitioned the Department of Theater, Speech, and Dance to speak up. In this petition, students wrote, and I quote, "Our department has profited from depicting Black violence and Black trauma on stage. We, as an institution, have a responsibility to tell stories and elevate Black voices. But right now, when we cannot perform on stage, we have the opportunity to speak out in support of our Black peers without the guise of costumes and curtains. We have the opportunity to stand as we are, without characters or scripts, with the Black individuals in our department, acknowledging their hurt, their anger, their sadness, and their frustration with a system that has oppressed them for 400 years. Over Willam & Mary's legacy, our department has contributed to that pattern of oppression. For our coworkers, our students, our alumni, and our friends, it is important that we do not ignore the systemic racism in our national institutions, and even more so, the closer institutions we call home," end quote. So in response to student demand, COVID, racism, police brutality, and systemic injustice within the department and in our nation, an ad hoc committee proposed an entirely new season, shows that could be done in a virtual medium with social distancing measures, shows that centered Black writers and created more opportunities for BIPOC actors and directors. Originally, I proposed Hands Up, 6 Playwrights, 6 Testaments, because it met the criteria we'd established. It had an unfortunate and timely message, and I thought we had a collective duty to create socially responsive art in a moment of crisis. And despite our collective commitment to a discipline and craft born out of religious, civic, and social matters, our department, accepting some individualized efforts, was usually conspicuously silent in times of national crisis. So as we delved into the possibilities for the work, I later learned that Hands Up had been updated with a seventh testament, Dead of Night, the Execution of, by Nambi Kelly. Unlike the other 6 plays, this testament looked specifically at Black women and the intersection of systemic racism, police brutality, internalized oppression, and intimate partner violence. Before the pivot, I was responsible, as I said earlier, for directing this play, as well as They Shootin' or I Ain't Never Scared by Idris Goodwin, and I worked with William and Mary seniors, Antonio Dilward and Milani Wright, respectively.
There we go. Hi, again, I'm Professor Elizabeth Wiley. I was part of that ad hoc season selection committee that Professor Green just mentioned. And first of all, I want to say I have such respect for my colleagues working on this project, such gratitude for students who hold us accountable, such appreciation for how we grow through our collaborations. And I was eager to be part of this season in whatever way would serve best, although also knowing that I may not be the most appropriate choice, a white person, to be one of the directors in a season where we are featuring all Black playwrights, roles for Black actors, Black composers, fully focusing on the Black experience. Our team of 6 directors for this includes 3 Black, 1 Asian, and 2 white people, 3 of whom are faculty and 3 of whom are William and Mary alums. So what am I doing here? And I wrestle with getting in this conversation because yes, it is at times uncomfortable, but I'm learning so much and I'm so deeply moved by being part of this whole thing here. The thing is, we white people, white theater, white American theater, we can no longer hand off the Black project to our Black colleague and say that we've checked off that diversity box, go do your play in Black History Month and good, because that's not how we need to go forward. We got to work together. We have to have a hand in inclusive theater making all together and be at the front lines of this fight against racism. We got to listen. We got to be curious about BIPOC stories. And in case you're tuning in and you're like, I still don't know what all those acronyms mean, that's Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, BIPOC. We got to care. And if we thought we were already walking that walk, well, we've still got a long road ahead of us. Keep walking, walk harder, talk deeper, listen better. So I was directing Holes in My Identity, working with Richmond actor Dwight Merritt. In this piece, give you a little tidbit on it, a light-skinned Black man who grew up in white suburbia with adoptive white parents is facing his feelings of separation from Black culture, Black experience, Black role models, holes in his identity. This character talks about experiencing microaggressions, everyday slights, insults, put-downs toward people of color, often perpetrated by well-intentioned white people, what we heard him do in the piece. This character realizes as he unpacks other such moments in his life just how ubiquitous those acts of dismissal are. And he offers one way to respond that offers hope and offers conversation rather than dismissal. I hope that's part of what we're doing tonight.
So hi, everyone. Like Liz stated, we had 3 alum directors on this show, which was really excellent. Myself, Louis Feemster, and Amanda Andre, we were all approached by Professor Francis Tanglau Aguas of the theater department and asked if we wanted to take part in this production. And I personally was really stoked about this project. I accepted it the day it was offered to me. Because when I was at William & Mary, I spent most of my time in the theater department. And also, it hasn't really been that long since I graduated, I love to think. So I still remember very clearly how the department works. And so it felt kind of like a homecoming for me. But the biggest reason why I wanted to join this team on this project is that as a Black William & Mary Theater graduate, I really understood the importance of having students of color be featured on the main stage, and especially Black students, how important it is to those students to be able to say that they are on the biggest stage at William & Mary. And even more especially when they're working on a show with an all-Black cast and oftentimes a Black director. So I was really excited to get into this audition process, which is actually where some of our first concerns arose as a direction team. Our first round of auditions was fairly sparsely attended. I believe we had 5 auditionees, and of those 5 actors, 2 of them were white. And for me, this spoke to the need for a couple of things. Firstly, the need for thorough, intentional, and timely outreach by the department when they're looking to perform diverse works. And secondly, the need for explicit, frank specificity when we are casting shows and telling our auditionees the racial needs of that show, the racial needs of that cast. And I find that second point kind of funny because we were very explicit that this was a show where every role needed to be filled by a Black actor. We had it written in our audition notices, and yet we still had white auditionees show up. So apparently that needed to be made clearer. But because of all of that, we ended up getting to hold a second round of auditions. And we reached out again to students on our campus, but also we opened the auditions to students at institutions beyond William & Mary, as well as to the general public, which was wonderful. And 4 out of the 7 people in our cast ended up being non-current William & Mary students. And I think that that's one of the most awesome things about this virtual theater experience that we're living in, is that it affords us a larger reach. But I also have to say that in some instances, it gave rise to maybe a somewhat isolating rehearsal process, especially when working on a heavier piece like Hands Up. And there was also a concern of being able to contextualize this production in a way that we had a sense of control over as artists. And I think that'll be talked about further in a later section of the conversation. But now I'm going to pass it over to the actor that I had the pleasure of working with on this process. And he's going to talk about his experience coming into this production. Go ahead, Nelson.
Hello, my name is Nelson, and I played Nathan in Superiority Fantasy. Keaton was my director for this play. And so this is my second play like ever. My first play was last year, Gem of the Ocean. The director was Dr. Omiemi Artisha Green. Fantastic experience. And I heard about this play this year. And it was interesting because there was, in the situation of sort of like auditions, there was a lot of parallel in that the department or the directors who are a part of this play were looking for Black actors. And there was some trouble of people actually like coming to audition. And so that also caught my eye and like definitely encouraged me to come and audition for this play, because it's extremely important, especially for the future of Black and just more diverse plays in the future, that we step up and take these roles as well. And so as I was reading the scripts, trying to figure out which play or which monologue I wanted to choose, I read Superiority Fantasy first, and almost immediately I connected with it, because from my high school experience, I went to a magnet school, and I was the only fully Black male in my graduating class at the magnet school of like 122 students. So throughout that entire experience, of course, that sort of came with a lot of microaggressions and just a lot of me having to change certain aspects of my Blackness in order, or in my personality, in order to make my white classmates feel more comfortable. And it's interesting because I went to a predominantly white program, and then now I'm at a predominantly white institution. And a lot of those aspects still transfer over, in that I have to and that I feel pressured to act a certain way or do certain things in order to make the white people feel comfortable. And it's touched on in Superiority Fantasy. And so as soon as I read that and I felt the connection, at that point it was like, okay, this is the one that I need to do. I read the other scripts, fantastic plays as well, but I just knew Superiority Fantasy was it. And so I auditioned, I got it. Keaton has been an amazing director. I've learned a lot from this, and I'm really grateful that we're able to have a conversation about it.
Thank you, each of you, for sharing that. I now invite our next set of panelists for the second part of our conversation. This part focuses on the process. What was the process of working on this piece like? What was positive, and what concerns arose?
Hello, I'm Dr. Claire Hammond, an assistant theatre professor at Willam Mary, and I directed Walking with Michael Brown.
Hello, I'm Lonnie Ray. I'm a senior at the college, and I was performing Dead of Night, The Execution of.
Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Tyler, and I was performing How I Feel by Dennis A. Allen II.
Hello, my name is Chadwick Clay Davo-Saint, and I was performing Abortion by Sangu Najika.
Okay, I'm going to begin. How I Feel, the title of the final monologue in the 7 shorts, which was just beautifully enacted by Aaron Tyler, invites us all of us, to put our hands up, a call for collective action, for us all to begin to feel and share, importantly, the exhaustion of systemic racism. As theatre makers, we often pride ourselves in the affective power of our medium. It's all about emotional transfer. How I Feel gives an F to any simple engagement of empathy. It lists over 400 years of an untreated trauma, the disease of white supremacy, and dehumanization. All of the pieces feature a reenactment of violent encounters between Black bodies and whiteness, often at the hands of the police. As directors, we were attentive to the potentially traumatic impact upon our actors embodying this material. We questioned how we were taking care of actor wellness and recognized that we all haven't lived through the same experiences of racism. We all engage different theatre techniques and methods that aspired to an ethics of care to both the material and to our actors. My process with Scotty Brewington of walking with Michael Brown, which uses all kinds of tongue and cheek, sly, comedic devices in a fantastical scenario of coming up with the magic words to end the unfortunate, brutal encounter between Michael Brown when he was murdered at the hands of the police, drew upon Brecht and also a bit of Trevor Noah to try and find the distanciation which would give critical focus to the violent gaze of whiteness. The William and Mary Counseling Center was called in as a support structure for all of the pieces, which is unusual to productions in the department. Even trigger warnings are something of a new and unevenly explored territory. I know when I was directing And Mary last year, there were concerns from some students that we should be giving trigger warnings about the narratives of sexual assault which occur in the piece. And my comeback was, if we're going to give those trigger warnings, we also have to give due attention to the narratives of racism. We explored one of the first plays by women produced 100 years ago, which was full of yellow face, and the history of Black women's exclusion on the 100 years anniversary. So these elements were new, at least in the pieces that I have worked with in my short time at the program. And we all regularly checked in with actors in a myriad of ways. But trauma piled on throughout our process, exhaustion and fear of crisis upon crisis. 2 days into my rehearsal process, the perpetrators of Breonna Taylor's murder got off scot-free. 5 days in, the president called on white supremacists to stand by. The next day, the president condemned Muslims and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Chadwick's character, Amen, dons a suicide jacket. Concerns of how such actions might be read, misused in these present contexts, whereas the final monologue warns it's open season out there. It really became clear that we couldn't guarantee the safety of our actors, emotionally, spiritually, physically. If we are really having a commitment to valuing Black lives, our responsibility starts here. In this context of precarity, compounded by the isolating dynamics of Zoom, and given right stipulations, processes, performances to be staged without liveness, we lacked the multiple sensorial dimensions of our medium to hold space safely and collectively. Lani, please.
So for me, I was really, really excited to work on the piece when I heard about it, because I heard Professor Green was directing the one female role. And I was really excited about the direction the department chose to go in, especially after being one of the signatures on that petition that was referenced earlier. As we started the rehearsal process, and as you read the play more and more, you found out new things each time. And I struggled really hard to connect to the character. She is so disconnected from her community, the Black community. She gets beaten by her white boyfriend, and she's beaten by the cops, and then expecting her boyfriend to help her, and then he doesn't. And even through all that, she goes through all these things with the with getting into the police system, and still calls her boyfriend back because there are the elements of that abusive relationship. And I found myself judging her in a way that you should never judge your character. And Professor Green and I had a lot of conversations back and forth about this, which we'll touch on in the next section. But some of the some of the way that she thought and felt was just really hard for me to connect to. So the one thing that I did, which is what Professor Green always says, is talk to your elders. So I called my mom, I called my grandmother, trying to get in touch with her feelings, with her disconnect, both from her trauma and from her community. And so I talked to them through all these experiences, but by the end, my mom was like, okay, well, I want to see what I'm helping you work on, because I show my mother everything. No matter what I do, I need her cosign so that I know it's good. So I had her read the piece, and then I performed the piece for her. And I remember she sat there and she looked at me and she said, "Who wrote this? Was it a white man?" And I was like shocked. And then she told me, "I mean, if you want me to see it, I will." Which, if you'd ever met my mother, which none of you have, you know that she is like go time. She's like the kind of woman that shows up to your basketball game dripped out in your colors of your team. So to hear her say that was just really shocking. And it reinforced everything that Professor Green and I had been discussing, that I had been disregarding, saying, no, it's fine, it's great. But sometimes you need to hear it from someone else. And to hear it from my mother, who I put everything through, really made me sit there and reevaluate and say, what am I doing? What does this mean? Why is she having this reaction? Why am I not having that reaction? Yeah, but I guess I'll popcorn to Aaron.
Yeah, for sure. I think what was important for me and Louis Feimster, who is my director for this piece, awesome guy, was that we looked at it more as a marathon, as he would say, a marathon as opposed to a race or a sprint. We took the material slow and we realized it was heavy lifting. It's deep stuff and it's traumatic and it's emotional. So we came at it from that aspect, making sure, he always made sure that I was protected, checked in before rehearsals to see like if I was okay for the day, if we needed to go lighter at the material for that day, or if we could really dive deep into it. So personally, I always felt like I was in a safe space, even though it is a screen. It's not that typical like theater space where it's warm and a community. It is kind of disconnected in this way, but I will say that he absolutely did his best to make sure it felt good, and it did for me. He says that we prepared to walk through the fire. That's how he kind of put it, that we were prepared to walk through the fire of 2020 and this crazy year. And I think part of it for us was that we drew from this year for inspiration for different parts of this piece. I believe it was like this whole collection was published somewhere in 2014, I think. But the fact that it's still related to this day, that also put fuel to the fire, because it's just like we're still dealing with these same things. And that definitely helped inform some of the choices we made.
Hello again, my name is Chadwick, and first of all, I would just like to give a big thanks to being able to work with the Willam and Mary Theater and Dance Company, as well as working with the great Amanda Andre. The approach that me and Miss Andre took, we did really, really deep script analysis. Before any of that, though, she would hit me on a daily and just ask me like if I'm okay. Is there anything that we need to talk about, you know, before rehearsal is? How are you doing? And so forth like that. As far as diving deep into the script, I learned a lot. Um, it's like every time we have a rehearsal, you know, reading it is one thing, but when she would just ask me questions, it 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 took my knowledge of understanding the text into a different world. And as far as, unfortunately, it is on Zoom, so there wasn't really the potential that it could have truly reached as far as all the monologues that everyone was a part of. My biggest concerns were was not trying to compare this text to my past experience. I just doing this script, it took me into a place where I've never been before. It made me embrace the fact that I've made it this far, and okay, I am willing and I am open enough to work upon the situation that I have been through. Me being able to overcome the bad, and me being able to just want to do better for everybody and myself. What was 100% gained through this was being able to tell my anxiety and to tell my guilt. It almost concluded the fact that I never forgave myself. And it just the message that it sent, it was so relatable that I just wanted to be in tears every single time I opened my phone and read the script. It served as a reminder to me that I will not be able to the process has helped me gain control of the part of me that I never thought I could control. And I would like to thank everyone so much for being able to educate me. I'm so happy to learn, and I am happier. I am so much more happier that I'm a part of this. I love creativity. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chadwick, for that generous sharing, and to all of you for your sharing in this part. We now move to the third part, which focuses on what we're calling the pivot. I invite the panelists who will discuss what ultimately led you to canceling the intended production and pivoting to a conversation about it instead. What was gained or lost as a result of this decision?
So can someone remind me in this section, am I going first, Claire, or is this you?
Oh, ma'am, they're going first.
Wonderful.
So I'm going first, correct? Yes.
It's all yours.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Sorry, my name's Scott Brington. I'm an alumni class of 2014, and I worked on Walking Next to Michael Brown with Claire. And I think the point of this section is to kind of talk about what steered the production in the direction that we ultimately led to in having this conversation today. And as I was doing the rehearsal process with Claire, I found that while Claire did her best with what she had in the Zoom and the pandemic environment, to make sure it was a safe space, she checked in with me regularly. She made sure that I always felt comfortable with the script and, you know, the content that was present, and the emotional vulnerability that it took. I just think that where we started the production process towards where we got right after the debate, and we had, you know, I'm trying to think, what was the other one, Claire? Yeah.
Which one? The Breonna Taylor's verdict that came on the second day.
And I remember both of those things, you know, Claire and I were debriefing before and after rehearsals because it just tied directly into what, you know, my monologue was all about. And it just became very clear that like there was a heightened racially charged environment in which the production was being held. And to no fault of William Mary at all, we just happened to have something on the panel for the season that happened to tie in directly with the racial climate of the country. And I, being a therapist myself in practice, am always conscientious of, psychological safety with my clients and physiological safety with my clients, and kind of thinking about, whenever I'm working with a client, making sure that I can hold them entirely and, hold whatever vulnerability they bring into that room. And I think that, around those times, Breonna Taylor's murderers getting acquitted and the debate, those things kind of started to resonate with me. And I was kind of like, curious as to what, other than, mental health counseling available to individuals, what were we doing to hold the cast, the production team at large, and make sure that they felt like those vulnerabilities could be aired and discussed and like held in a safe way. And it just became a little bit more apparent to me that maybe that wasn't possible. And so that's kind of like when I reached out to Claire and was kind of saying, like, is this the time for this? And what are we doing to make sure that the Black bodies that we're putting on our screens are being taken care of?
Thank you, Scotty. You've really said it all, but I'll add a few other thoughts. Scotty is also an alumni of the program. William and Mary, his experience of the program goes back far longer than my own. And I remember one of our first conversations amidst discussions of Peppermint the Drag Queen. We talked about your experiences of racism at predominantly white institution of William and Mary. The excerpt, which we had some technical issues with right now, that Scotty was going to perform through no fault of his own. These two mechanics are part of our process. Cites and has him embody the final words of Black men at the hands of the police, followed by the white Charlie Rose, who says, "Yes, thank you, now do it just like that when we're rolling." This was one of the last rehearsal pieces before Scotty shared his intent to withdraw from the process. And it was one in which I was extremely uncomfortable directing. Am I seen as a Charlie Rose in the process as the white director in the room? Is the intended audience for these pieces indifferent, cold Charlie Roses? And I wonder, within a context of institutional racism at William and Mary and where the nation is at, my whiteness is of course not neutral, but playing out pain to a white director, to largely white audiences, involves structural relations of power. And I'm very thankful that pointed the path for us to pause and reconnect and check in. The show might not go on, but we're talking and listening as a and it's precisely this moment of collectivity and the plurality of voices and experiences that the Zoom monologue never gives, through which I hope as a program, as a department, we can cultivate new spaces of joy, of hope, of affirmation, of pulling up from the past to make better futures. Thank you. Omi, please.
So, first, staging Hands Up using the framing device of social media or a digital platform raised challenges that we could not figure out how to solve, challenges which were making me increasingly uncomfortable. We were no longer working under normal and more controlled conditions of theater making. and bringing witnesses to the scene place to experience live theater. So rather than working with weapons under the oversight of a weapons wrangler, we were now faced with the challenges of mailing a body cavity bomb prop to an actor, as is called for in one of the pieces. So what would the challenges be if someone encouraged to, quote, stand down and stand by, took the performance of Shongboshi Kam's abortion out of its virtual yet fictional context and believed that the actor was a terrorist and really intended to blow up a police station? At least when audiences come to the scene place, they agree to willingly suspend their disbelief and engage the controlled and fabricated world of the play. But here in the scene place, no cameras or video footage are allowed. However, in a digitally streamed context, there was no way for us to stop a registered participant, racist and pathological, from ripping footage from abortion into another media form and targeting the actor as an enemy of the state. Secondly, the levels of disregarded oppression covered in Nnamdi Kalu's Dead of Night mirrored levels of oppression playing out before our eyes in real time, some of which have been mentioned repeatedly. As we know, after languished detention and judicial investigation on Breonna Taylor's case, it was an investigation commenced, but no officers were indicted in her murder. As the blatant disregard for Black humanity, a fact of American history since at least 1619, continues to be shown to us repeatedly, I question if Black testimonies of trauma are impactful enough to compel white people to act against their privilege and self-interest and change their optics of a people historically believed to be impervious to pain and unworthy of dignity. George Floyd testified, "I can't breathe," 20 times at least. Eric Garner testified, "I can't breathe," at least 12 times that I could count. In the interview with Fox News, Walter Wallace Sr. testified that his wife, Kathy Wallace, cried out for help. She pleaded for help with her son, Walter Wallace Jr., and was ignored. The underlying health conditions of the Black woman in the dead of night, the panic attacks, the irregular heartbeat, her small stature, none of these testimonies of her white boyfriend made the cops treat her less aggressively, nor did those testimonies encourage her boyfriend, her oppressor, to become her savior as she thought it would. As I thought more deeply, I began to question the value of producing Hands Up in this particular context, an environment which has historically, intellectually, and creatively marginalized Blackness and Africanity at the expense of, and I quote, thousands of years of international drama that we are obligated to teach, end quote. Yes, we did create an opportunity for 7 Black actors across 3 campuses in several states, 2 of whom wanted to work with me specifically, a rare opportunity because of structural oppression within the department. What was the real value of replicating Black trauma under the gaze of whiteness in a virtual medium? And in creating an opportunity for Black students, how was I serving my own personal artistic mission, which is really set on fortifying the marginalized and dehumanized through principles of Black theater? There is a certain level of distance which comes with teaching, contextualizing, and investigating the dramaturgy of Hands Up. But in artistic practice, in the context of dual pandemics and the constant murdering of Black people, spending hours of rehearsal, testifying, explicating, providing evidence, documentation of Black pain, oppression, or victimization due to systemic oppression, and pathological expressions of whiteness kept me in a continuing cycle of grief. And I, like Scott, who resigned, I also wanted out. So in addition to giving me my time back, the pivot inspired a renewed commitment to the ethics of my research in ritual drama and ritual technology. I'm interested in work that actually waters the soul, work that gives life, work that can untether people to internal conflict, work that will elevate the cultural consciousness of the people, work that will embolden and strengthen humanity in ways that can inspire a warrior disposition, work that can be the molasses or the honey that we need to fight or temper the warring forces, and work that will allow me to keep the impulses of Black theater alive.
I guess to add to that, to our pivot, I guess I should say, is that Professor Green and I had been going back and forth, having a conversation before we got the verdict on the Breonna Taylor case, before the debates that had happened about who this play is for, and why that matters. So in the beginning, we were on very different sides of that coin, whereas Professor Green was explaining all that you just heard her say. I was of the mentality that if it's able to reach just one person, I'm willing to do it. If it will play even some minor role, these stories need to be told. I want to be the one to tell it. But that was before we had that week of nothing but bad thing after bad thing after bad thing happening rapidly. And so I did my research, I spoke to my elders, I talked to my mother, we had that conversation. And from that point on, when my mother had expressed the same sentiments as Professor Green, we went into our Monday rehearsal and we just spoke the whole time. Because then my mentality had been shifted. And then the following week, everything happens with Breonna Taylor, everything happens with the first presidential debate. And I got to a point where I did not believe that what I needed to be doing, that what we needed to be doing to move ourselves forward was exposing trauma of Black people to white people. I don't think that that's a work that we need to be doing. What we need to be doing, it seems like in this place, so much trauma is already happening out in the world before our eyes. We see it on every news outlet, is that we need to be uplifting, not traumatizing the Black community. When we do a show like this, it should be for them. And I think that had this show happened first in the season, had it happened a few months ago, I don't think that as many of us would have felt the same way as we ended up feeling when it came to be crunch time in really performing the piece. So yeah, so then I came of the mentality of Professor Green that I don't think this is what I should be doing. Especially I ended up, I don't know how many of you saw, I co-authored a open letter with Kiana Bonds talking about similar things, about how we can't rely on Black people to be doing all of the work, to be showing you why you should care. You need to be caring. You should be out there doing the research. And so having written a 19-page document on why you should do that, it felt very hypocritical of me to then go on stage in this virtual setting and be doing the exact same things that I just said that should not be done. So.
Hello again, my name is Chadwick. Thank you to the previous speakers that just spoke. That was amazing. Lessons learned. So where I would like to start out is what led the production as far as motivation goes. I took it in a more creative color aspect, being able to work with non-white people and white people. It felt really good to work on a project in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, politics, and stereotypes. I like to consider this, everything that's going on now, I like to kind of consider it the new age of color. A big thing, what was gained was college and university relationships. For the longest, ever since being at my institution, I have felt like I never really got the chance to branch out and do more biopic related projects. And being able to be a part of this has really opened my eyes up to another world of acting and performing. And I really, really appreciate that. Now I feel like I am at step one in figuring out how I can pivot myself and lead myself into further personal development. A big thing that we did talk about at the end of my play, Amen, he finalizes his letter and he sacrifices himself by putting on an explosive vest and going into a precinct and blowing up that precinct. Well, it's actually, we kind of, it was in the end, so it was kind of a question at the end. But the buildings of emotion that came with that, we looked for alternate ways in order to try and make it as safe as possible, because when it came to me auditioning and everything, I was just like, okay, let me get whatever I can get to make myself out there. I want to put myself out there. It doesn't matter what it is. When really understanding that I'm putting on an explosive vest and being filmed in public, that raised an eyebrow for me. At first, I was completely okay with it. I did not feel endangered because the directors, Willam and Mary, made me feel safe. I felt safe the entire time. So I took it upon myself. Okay, this is happening. It needs to still be out there. So at least one person will get it, referencing what Lonnie said. At least one person will at least understand what's going on. But now I'm starting to understand how that can kind of flip into context, and it can be a problem, not only for myself, but for others who may feel like this is not it. Willam and Mary and the directors, they took the precautions that was needed in order for us to make sure that we were completely okay with everything. So at first I was very enraged and angered that this production was canceling. But that was solely based on me being able to relate to the monologue so much. But now I'm starting to understand that the message still can be put out there, and we were fortunate enough to be able to have this conversation, this event tonight, in order to at least still put it out there. And what's next is really what matters as far as how we can take the steps to keep it pushing. So thank you.
Chadwick, that's a brilliant transition into our next part, which addresses the question, what's next? Thank you for that. If our next set of panelists could join me, we're answering questions. What have we learned from this process? How are we moving forward in the theater department and performing arts in the greater community with this new knowledge, especially in this current moment of dual pandemics? Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Lori Wolf. I'm the chair of the department. In our discussion with the actors over how to proceed with the show, an important point was brought up by one of them. When do we get to speak? The question applied to Black people specifically, but also to other oppressed identities. The Department of Theater has a long history of racism, which you have been hearing about all evening. We need to take stock of how institutional racism manifests within itself. We need to identify the responsibility we have to take ownership of our history and create new possibilities for our future. Fortunately, we have people in our department who don't want that history to stand, who want to make change and make a difference. We have our current students who want to see that change happen and who are holding us to account. We have our former students, in this case, Keaton and Amanda and Lewis, who care enough about the college and the department, and Scotty, to return to participate in a forum like this, because it just might make a difference. We have colleagues who are creating theater with former students who are talking about their personal experiences and are actually being heard. We have members of our faculty who are beginning to listen to the conversation. That's a start. We're going to have to shift our thinking, shift our fundamental ideology, and shift our priorities. Our students will come first. Our students will have a voice. Our students will be heard. This will not be an easy task. Just in case you missed it, there's going to be an election in about 5 days. No matter the outcome on Tuesday, it's going to have a significant impact on us all and what we do. As creators of art that relies on human empathy, we aspire to create a community built on respect, belonging, collaboration, and creativity. As artists invested in exploring multiple perspectives and fostering social justice, we must embrace the value of our students. We have to encourage an environment in which our differences are explored with generosity and openness. How can we, as a PWI performance department, support and showcase marginalized Black American voices while supporting and encouraging Black students? Further, how can we support artists entering a field that may not honor their marginalized voices and talents? We need to put people first. We need to create an art that is relevant and to the moment. The department followed its status quo for far too long. Looking forward, we will embrace distinctive voices from a range of perspectives, embracing the differences of race, biological sex, religion, age, national origin, gender identity, and/or sexual orientation. By hosting this forum, we're reshaping and affirming the vision of the kinds of students we want to attract, an inclusive and diverse group of artists. Thank you.
I can start us off. I think, and I'm quite confident in saying this, but most of the change I feel has to start at the top. I don't think we can just have Black actors, although that is an extremely important part in representation. I think most of the change will start in having more people of color in the decision rooms, in picking which plays are being performed, in deciding and creating the different curriculums for these different classes. Because for me, I'm from an HBCU. I'm not from Willam Mary. And it's been interesting to see the differences between the two studying, we study James Baldwin and August Wilson and all these incredible Black playwrights, and we dive deep into Black art, and we're prepared well to be Black actors. I heard somewhere that every character you play, for Black actors, every character we play is going to be Black, no matter if they were written to be a different color or anything. They're going to be Black because we're Black. So it's a matter of how we prepare our actors to combat these systems and to dive into this theater space that has historically been predominantly white. I came from a high school that had a predominantly white theater space. So that's why one of the main reasons I really wanted to go to an HBCU is because I just wanted to get that experience of Black theater and being surrounded by all these different Black artists and actors, as opposed to just having the amount of actors, Black actors that I can count on my hand that were in high school, you know? But yeah, I definitely do think there's value in PWIs learning from HBCUs things that could well prepare their students to be Black actors and other actors of color.
To piggyback off what Aaron said, my situation is the complete opposite. I go to a predominantly white institution. So as far as me being able to figure out my spot within my program, how I can become a better Black actor for myself and others. I decided to reach out to a beautiful, lovely outlet. I received a lot of information from this person, and it really it showed me and told me that I am not alone. Throughout this person's experience being in the theater program and being of color, they felt small, very, very small. And it is welcoming and it is nice to know that someone else feels the exact same way. Okay, so what do? We need to be able to collaborate and be together. We need to come together. We need to make sure people feel the uncomfortable, make sure people feel the problems that we have. We need to start petitions. We need to start putting on projects. We need to start hosting events. We need to start doing more on the campus to actually let people know that we are serious about this. You should take us serious because we're lethal. We're very, very, very lethal. But as far as being able to just work with Aaron, working with Lonnie, working with working with the directors here, it opened me to be able to learn more on how I can place myself at my institution. I really, really love the idea of being able to have future relationships with other universities and colleges to collaborate because, like I said, it is lethal. We could be lethal. But that is mainly it. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, I'm Dwight Merritt. I did not go to Willam Mary. I'm actually a graduate of Rowan University, class of 2011. I have a BFA from them. That program was way more ensemble based. So that is where my acting style comes from. When I was there, they taught us a lot about the overall feeling of theater and how to be collaborative artist and, you know, take different pieces and different things that you may not be doing all the time. So you may be an actor, but they taught us how to do like lighting and set design and stuff like that, so that we were more of a well-rounded performer and entertainer than just an actor or a director or anything like that. So I think that moving forward, what needs to happen is us as Black actors need to find our own space. If our space is not being presented to us, we need to create it ourselves. As a Black actor, Black performer, we need to get together and, you know, start making theater groups that are completely Black so that we can do all of these things that we want to do. And I think as an institution, as a PWI, maybe teaching your actors how to be more assertive and go-getters to form and create their own space so that they have a voice and they have these places where they can act and perform and feel comfortable. Being a part of the community at large of actors, it's all about networking. And if you can find your network, make sure that you align yourself with people who are thinking the same thing that you are and you know, have the same ideals. And that is what I feel like the theater community as a whole needs to do moving forward. Yes, we're not going to stamp out racism overnight. It's always going to be an issue. But as a Black actor, we need to be strong and, you know, as my piece says, not let anyone dismiss us. We cannot be dismissed. And that is a huge thing. I'm so happy that this conversation happened and we didn't get dismissed in that way. But we need to make sure that we are working together to be that driving force that Chadwick was just talking about and be that's, you know, scary presence that we are there, we are Black, we are here, we are proud, and you're going to hear us. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Dwight. It's Elizabeth Wiley. I'm back again. We're now looking at the Q&As that you guys have some great questions, and there's so much here to unpack. Chance has a question. He asked me if there's anything I have to say to white actors and directors who don't realize the importance of elevating Black voices and stories, or even just listening. Woo! You know what? It's a long road. And I'm somewhere on the road. I'm farther down the road than I was, you know, before we did this project. I can remember some conversations that Professor Green and I had some years ago, and I was, you know, I thought I was doing a great thing with some colorblind casting, and it turns out I was only seeing it through my white lens. I wasn't considering how might this look in this context with these characters in this story through other lenses. And you know, I think that what we have to do is keep at it, keep talking to each other, keep challenging each other in when there are conversations where there might be some people who aren't quite seeing things in a broader perspective. And those conversations can be really hard and awkward. And sometimes I would just want to walk away. And so I think that, you know, in order to really move forward down this road altogether and toward joy, right? But I have to know that I'm going to be walking through some mucky stuff, but hell, it's toward joy, and it's towards uplifting everybody who's part of this world that we live in. So I don't have a good, there's not an easy answer, except that we have to dig in.
I'll help you out there, Liz. Hi, everyone. So first, I just want to apologize to Chance. I believe you use she, her pronouns. We just saw that in the chat go by. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I think what is so wonderful about a college arts program is it's first and foremost an educational experience. And so in learning to value Black voices, Black input, Black perspective, you start with teaching about those perspectives. A lot of the work that Professor Green did, I was blessed to benefit from at my time at Willam Mary. When I took theater history and her Black expressive culture class, she was very intentional in letting us know about the practice of Black theater and how that is important. And then I was also lucky enough to be a part of the show Regina Taylor's Crowns, which was directed by Professor Green. And that was also just a beautiful educational experience and really made me start to reckon with this connection between my own experience as a Black American person and also connecting back to my African roots and African spirituality and all of that, and African forms of storytelling. And what was so unfortunate, kind of like you said, Liz, and Chance kind of referenced in her question, was I had peers who came to see Regina Taylor's Crowns and didn't get it. And they didn't understand. They thought it was a bad show. They didn't recognize the power in the storytelling that we were doing. And they were emboldened to tell me that to my face, that they didn't enjoy the show. They didn't think it was good. And I had to reckon with that. These were not only white people, these were also non-Black people of color. And so it is important that we are elevating when we're talking about theater, when we're talking about teaching theater, when we are talking about teaching performing arts, there are so many ways to perform. There are not just white ways to perform. So, and I would even say, as I learned in Lori Wolf's contemporary theater and feminism class when I went to Willam Mary, we have to redefine the canon. We have to redefine what we consider the classical canon of theater so that it's not just white and male, but that there are women, that there are queer folks, that there are Black people, Asian people, all types of people, Latinx voices, Indigenous voices. Like, there's so many stories to be told and so many ways to tell those stories. And so I think as an educational institution, you start there, education. Thank you for your question, Chance.
I see from our Q&A, some questions were addressed as earlier in the panelists, but I'll go ahead and ask them again in case other panelists want to add to that. Deidre asks, what was the process like working on such a timely piece for the actors and directors? And I'll go ahead and add, additionally, she asks, how did you self-care during the process? Panelists, please join me if you'd like to answer or add to that.
Oh, I'll definitely hop in on the self-care one. Okay. So after rehearsals, okay, I can answer both actually. As far as timing goes, with our assistant stage manager and my director, we made sure that we had everything time manageable, make sure that we weren't stepping on each other's schedule, because Amanda actually lives in California. So the time difference was like 3 hours apart. So she's a trooper, because I understand her schedule is probably very, very busy. And to meet with people on the other side of the America is really nice, really time manageable. So it's just a matter of just letting each other know our schedules and making sure that we're all good before rehearsal time. We were never really late to a rehearsal at all. If it was probably my fault. But also I'll go ahead and answer the self-care question. As far as self-care goes, it got very, very intense, diving deeper and deeper into the script. So Amanda, I don't think she really understood how much it meant to me to be able for us to be able to take a mini break when needed. It was a pretty good amount of time. It was just a 7-minute break. It was just enough to remain present, remain on top of things, and to remain conscious with the piece. As far as what I did outside of that, when revisiting it back on my own time, I would have to look at it for a certain amount of time, maybe like 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, I'd go do something else that benefited me, to where I wouldn't be stuck dwelling in the emotions and the mindset of my character, Amen. So that's how I did it.
Because I was very connected to my piece, being a man of color and also a gay male, my character reveals that he is gay at the end of the piece. For those who don't know, it was very, very hard for me to take myself out of that sometimes. Also, I am of a mixed race. My mother is white, my father is Black. So I had a lot of push and pull within practicing and doing this piece, because there was a lot of it that spoke to me, and a lot of it I just didn't know how I felt about, my life, and if I had enough Black experience and Black role models and things like that. So that was very, very hard for me, and I had a lot of intense conversations with friends of mine, and with Liz, and with Anne, my stage manager. And it was very interesting. And we always took a lot of time to just talk about what was going on throughout the day at the beginning of rehearsal, make sure we kept it light until we got into practicing things. And for me, just reminding myself that this was not my life. I may connect and be very, very in tune with the piece that I was doing, but these were not my experiences, and this was not my life, was something that I had to keep reminding myself. And while I may feel very, very aligned with my character, those experiences were not mine. And so I just had to make sure that I was good, and walking into the piece, I remembered this is just something that I'm putting on. This is a character. This is not me. This is not my experience. That was that for me was how I self-cared for myself. Just making sure that I kept reminding myself that I was not this person, and my experience was still good, and I still had things to be happy about, and things like that.
For me, I would like to say that one, the process itself wasn't taxing for me. However, the timeliness of the piece was extremely taxing. Just considering the different things that are going on, my person had 3 different parts that he presented. One was about being just a Black man trying to let a bird outside of his own house, and that feeling of fear of a person automatically assuming that you're trying to break in or something like that. The second piece being explaining to another person, like, why are we always coming back to this conversation about race? And to show from like this hierarchical angle of they recognize that race is an issue. They're actually paying me to come here to discuss race. However, people don't like to acknowledge the fact that race is the root of these issues that we're discussing. And his last part being of this dream that he had of this comparison, which kind of wish I would have did that one, of this comparison between like the murderers of the killing of wild buffalo during in earlier times. I ain't gonna give a specific time period in comparison to the killing of Black people in the United States now. And for me, the conversation in itself has just been taxing, and considering the different circumstances going on continuously, including the circumstance that just occurred in Philadelphia. I myself am from Philadelphia. The man that was murdered was a next door neighbor to a family member of mine. And everyone knows him to have like this mental issue or whatnot. And I had to have a conversation with one of my former mentees, and she asked me a question very directly and was like, do tasers only work for white people? So like having these conversations from in real life and then coming back to the play and looking at my piece and then having this conversation again has been taxing. But the one way that I've learned to self-care throughout this process is to realize when I'm at my limit, to realize like this is a moment now that I need to step back, and whether it's for my piece, whether it's for my life in general, that I need to step back and either give my energy to this, give my energy to that, or just give my energy to me. And I think that separation is crucial when dealing with something as timely as this is.
Thank you, Antonio. There's an anonymous question that I invite anyone to help me answer. If people attending the webinar want to read the full text of this piece, is there a way that theater, dance, or swim can offer access to it?
I don't know, Monica. Well, of course, there are licensing agreements at play, so we can't just send it out because we pay these people for their work. However, we can investigate the possibilities that swim might offer for Willam Mary staff, faculty, students who may be interested in the work. We can see what's possible.
Okay, thank you.
And what I will say is we've said the name of the play a bunch of times tonight. It's called Hands Up, 7 Playwrights, 7 Testaments. I'm sure you could get a little reader edition very cheaply online if you would like to read the piece. Thank you.
Excellent point. This question comes again from Chance, and this one's for Lonnie Wright. Focusing on what you said about questioning the reactions of your character and delving deeper in order to connect to her feelings, do you think that's something that will transfer to the future roles you play?
I think that that's something you always have to do as an actor. I typically don't act at Willam and Mary, but when I did in high school, that was paramount, right? I always did intense roles that had to do with some level of trauma. I think that my difficulties here really stem from the fact that I could see myself more in this character than I could in any other that I had done, especially being part of being written to be a Black character, which isn't something that you often get the opportunity to do. Seeing her have that disconnect with her community for seemingly no reason, right? Like she has a good relationship with her brother, with her mother, with her father. So seeing her have that disconnect, and as a member of that community, not understanding why, like, why wouldn't you go to your people? Why wouldn't you do X, Y, and Z? It took me a lot more tempering than I think it did with a lot of other roles to be like, no, she's not you. You need to calm down. Just because you're my idea of what it means to be Black is not everyone's idea of what it means to be Black. And so I think that that's something I had to reckon with outside of just, okay, why would she feel like this? That I had to do a little work on me first, which is what I think set this role apart.
Thank you. This question is for Nelson, comes from Casey. Casey, you said this is your second play ever. The first one was Gem of the Ocean. As someone who's relatively new to theater, how would you say acting in pieces like this has affected you?
So yeah, I said this is like my second play ever. Like going into Willam Mary, I really never thought that I was gonna do theater in high school. I didn't do it. And like even now, like I'm a pre-med student, like right after this, I had to like go study for chem. And so when I did like get the opportunity to be a part of Gem of the Ocean last year, as a lot of the members of the cast can say, and Professor Green could say, is that especially like starting off from it and then going to the end, there was a lot of change that I personally had to go through in terms of like, oh, my own like level of confidence or just how like, it's just like so much stuff that I didn't expect to learn from theater that could be applicable to my own life. And it was really cool to be able to bring those lessons to this piece now. And especially being in productions with all Black, with an all Black cast and playing a Black character, definitely like it's so what am I trying to say? Empowering to be able to play a character. And even though, yes, it's a character that I'm playing, just the connections that I'm able to make with them due to that like relatability of race, which like speaks so much to how much like representation matters and how we do need more like Black plays and Black actors on campus, and just how, and yeah, I don't know what else to say, but it's been incredible, and I'm hoping to do more plays on campus. But yeah, thank you.
We hope to see you on stage soon. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. Audiences don't have a cautious rehearsal process before they participate in a show. What is the desired audience response to a potentially or intentionally triggering production such as Hands Up, the conversation?
I'll weigh in on this one. So I want to make it clear that I believe that part of the reason that we felt that this production would be triggering was because of the space where it was being presented. So Williamsburg, when we're talking about race, is a very polarizing place. Some of the directors got to see a production of this piece, Hands Up, 7 Playwrights, 7 Testaments, that was done at Florida A&M University, which is an HBCU. And to have a piece that is about Black pain or Black trauma in a primarily Black space may not be as triggering as if you are a sole person or one of few people, Black people in a predominantly white space. Because it's this, one of the things that I love about theater is this communal emotional experience that we're all having. And if you as a Black person are having a very emotional experience and everyone around you is like, what is this? Like, ooh, like Black people feel this way? Oh, I didn't know. Like that can be triggering. But if everyone around you is like, ooh, I know that feel. Oh, again, and we're laughing and we're crying and we're feeling together, it can be more empowering. So I think that speaks back to what Lonnie was speaking on before about the work that we should be striving to do right now should be work that is uplifting, inspiring, and empowering Black, Indigenous, and other people of color.
Thank you, Keaton.
I just wanted to say that I feel to the adverse, not in contrast to it. I agree with everything that was just said. But I do feel as performers in theater, we should be challenging people. We should be, triggering people. I always say that if you are uncomfortable in theater, then you are in the right spot. If you feel comfortable in the theater in which you are watching a show, you need to get up and go to another theater because you're not watching the right show. I believe as performers, we need to be challenging people every single day with the art that we do. And so this question is a very good question. As an audience member, you don't walk into a theater knowing what you're about to see. And if it triggers you in a way that you feel is bad, then maybe you need to reevaluate the things that are going on in your life so that you can, not feel that way anymore. And it's our job as an artist to be this challenging voice within the world. That's why we came into this profession. So, I think that triggering sometimes is a word that's looked at in a bad light, but sometimes you need to be triggered. Sometimes you need to have this, visceral reaction to the things that you are watching so that you start to ask the important questions.
I'm gonna hop in really quick because something Dwight said really spoke to me. I picked this up a little while ago and I'm really not exactly sure where I got it from, but it's the saying that in the theater, you take away from it what you bring to it. And I think this piece in particular, it can really speak to that, because if you come into the theater knowing that you're going to see something that's powerful and that may be triggering, but it still has a message to it, you're going to find the messages and it's going to speak to you the way that it can only speak to you. You know what I mean? And I think, as Dwight was saying, like, theater should be challenging and it should make you uncomfortable. It should make you have discussions and figure out why you feel uncomfortable about this certain thing that this certain actor said, like, it's a process that you discover yourself in.
Thank you. I want to direct Professor Green's attention to the Q&A. There's a request for a quote about witnessing testimonies of Black trauma, Deidre. But also I'll follow up with another question. I don't know if you want to read it here or just send that to her another way, Professor Green.
It's moving so fast. So the chat is, I can't read it if you can just tell me.
She's saying, thank you for speaking about the transition in the process. Professor Green, I need that quote about witnessing testimonies of Black trauma.
Oh, sure. I'll find a way to send it to you. I got it. Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question from Deidre. I'm curious about the structural oppression in the department. How do we ensure support of the work and experiences that you have brought and continue to bring to Willam Mary Theatre?
Well, one of the first things we can do, as I mentioned in a recent faculty meeting, is first to start taking care of faculty, seeing the people first, and then creating an infrastructure that will support the people. Remembering the commitment when we hire Black faculty and other faculty of color to come in and do specific work. Remember that, and then do not marginalize them to the what are the courses that I'm thinking of? The electives. Don't marginalize them further by putting them in the margins of the curriculum. Allow them to infuse their teaching and their research all throughout the curriculum, excuse me. And we can certainly start there. We can also, as leaders, faculty leaders in the department, have conversations with the entire student body, our majors and our minors within the department, and certainly open the door to invite those larger conversations, open the door to have those larger conversations by inviting students who want to be a part of what we're doing. But we have to teach the students about why we're structuring our curriculum in the way that we're doing it. I will say that when I came to William & Mary, I honestly do not think that any of the majors and minors had been prepared for my arrival. My understanding was that that the wisest thing to do was to center me at the center of what was important in the department, which was theater history, world theater history, and introduction to theater. And when I tried to bring my expertise into those areas and sort of decentralize predominant ways of thinking about the construction of early theater history, predominantly white majors, it was a very adverse experience for me for the first couple of years of my experience at William & Mary. It was rough. And it wasn't until I found a home in Africana Studies and I began to have some agency over what I wanted to teach. And I found ways of reminding the department of why they hired me to begin with, that things began to shift. And so as we got new cohorts of students, I noticed that students would follow me from one class to the next class. And so Black theater was slowly making its way across the curriculum, even though I was still largely teaching elective courses, and I still am. So as I said, we need to reshift our curriculum so that the courses that Black faculty are generally brought in to teach, if they're hired as African-American theater historians, as I was, become central to the major. And we also need to infuse this knowledge all throughout other areas in the curriculum. So even if you're taking a class on scenic design or lighting design, acting, it's in those courses as well. So it's not simply centralized in the courses that I teach, because I may not reach all of the students, but that doesn't mean that all of the students don't need the content.
Thank you for that. We have more questions for you, so don't go anywhere. Another question from Casey is, how do you think theater can be used for healing of both the actors and the attendees?
I believe that theater is the place where we come to see each other's humanity more deeply. So a lot of our conversation has been about season selection. And I think that when we're choosing season selection, yes, there are things that we want to teach our students, skills that they need to master if they're going to go into the profession. I'm totally with that. But if we're also teaching empathy, then we also need to identify shows that are going to allow us to build that skill set in our students and also in the audience. So making sure, in addition to the shows that we teach that can enhance that skill set, I'm a big proponent of pre and post show events or conversations so that audiences have an opportunity to talk immediately with the cast and members of the production team about their experiences, so that we begin to cultivate audiences, that students get used to defending the production choices and being able to talk about it intelligently. Conversation is everything, and I think the more we can bring the audiences together, the witnesses together with what they've just seen, and the actors who've been portraying this role, I think that we enhance those skills more deeply.
This question comes from Chance. When Black people, it's for you too. Yes, you again. When Black people speak their truth when it comes to racism, it's not taken seriously. But when a white person explains racism, they are listened to. Why are white voices valued more than Black experience? How do we combat this?
Oh dear. Why are white voices more? I mean, I think we've been saying that all night, right? You know, there are perspectives of Black people, you know, that our voices, that our pain, that our experiences don't matter. I mean, that's a real lived experience for us. And you're talking about power and privilege. I mean, I think it really comes down to that. With whiteness, the presentation of it comes power and privilege. And so if you were to say something, or you know, someone else who is white presenting were to say something, it probably would be heard and more received than it would if I said it first. And I know that to be true. That's just what it is. Is it right? No. But that is what it is. Now, does it make me any less willing to speak and say what I need to say? No. So my answer to that would be that we need to continue, we, Black people, need to continue using your voice. And maybe white allies need to listen more and maybe not talk so much.
Thank you. This question is for Nelson. Were you taken aback by how much you connected to the character you played? Do you feel like it was relieving, or did it sadden you that so many Black people shared the same experiences?
So it was definitely a mix of both. I was like so just being able to connect in that way was definitely like relieving, but at the same time, this isn't the first time I've heard of somebody having sort of like a similar sort of situation as I, and having to, you know, like change myself in order to make white people feel more comfortable. Like even my director was able to speak to my director Keaton was able to speak to that as well. And I'm sure a lot of the members of the cast and just like Black people all over the world can speak to that as well. And it definitely was saddening because it's sort of just like the constant reminder that that there's still like work to be done, and that we still need to not I'm having trouble trying to find what I'm saying tonight. But yeah, nah, just like it's that I will just say that it is saddening. However, it definitely added to the connection that I have to the work, and that I'm able to feel both relieved and sort of this other emotion to it.
I'm going to piggyback off of what Nelson said. So Nelson was one of two actors that we ended up casting who did have a strong preference for the piece that he wanted to perform. And I took note of that. He emailed all of the directors and told us that he specifically wanted to perform Superiority Fantasy. And it's so funny, and the reason now I saw it was kind of fate, and the reason I ended up casting him was because when I was choosing the show that I wanted to direct, I was given a couple of options. And when I read Superiority Fantasy, I was like, I want to direct Superiority Fantasy. And so it was nice that we had that kind of immediate connection to the piece. And so there was kind of like a shorthand for talking about certain things. There were experiences that we shared, references that we shared. And so I believe that, again, I wasn't in his head during that process, but I would hope that our rehearsals we were finding a way to connect to the character that was not too upsetting, or yeah, upsetting is the right word. That's it.
Thank you. I think we have one more question, and I invite anybody to chime in to answer this, and all of our panelists to rejoin me on screen when you're ready. Is there a market for this challenging subject?
I think so. I think earlier it was said that some of us had an opportunity to see the FAMU production. I was one of those individuals that were able to see that production. And I also saw excerpts of this production at the Black Theater Network conference. Shout out to my Black Theater Network family. I think I saw a couple of you as attendees. And my experience of this play in both of those contexts was very different. I actually felt I was among people that I felt comfortable grieving with. And I don't get that feeling when I think about this work in the context of William and Mary. I appreciate the comments that Dwight mentioned earlier, but there's something about performing this level of deep grief under a sea of white eyes, so to speak, and then sending the collective of Black students back out into a predominantly white world at William and Mary. So they're going right back out into a world where in some places it continues to dehumanize them. It continues to try to make them feel as if they have no intellectual value, that their choice of study, let's say it's Africana studies, or let's say it's Black theater, that it has no intellectual merit. It's as if they just purged and cried, and then they go right back out into a sea of pain. And that didn't make any sense to me, especially when we're just now at this point of trying to come up with culturally competent ways of protecting them, and we haven't figured it out yet. Could we do it here at some point? Perhaps, maybe. I don't think we're there yet. And so again, it's important for me to use my platform and my leadership role and my teaching and my service in ways that are going to temper them, that's going to strengthen them. So when they go back outside of the main stage, that they feel empowered, that they remember their sovereignty, that they have a cultural ground and a cultural consciousness that can hold them as they move across the campus. There's certainly a market for it. It's just not here.
I believe we have one more question that came through Dr. Griffin, and I think it's an important one.
Thank you. So what is the department taking away from this conversation? What is one immediate action that will be taken after this?
That is a big question. And I invite the rest of my colleagues to come up on here with me. I can tell you that we are digging in we started talking about this week at a faculty meeting. We're bringing in Nicole Brewer, who is a theater artist who's been holding workshops with people about how to be anti-racist and how to work with that within your own work structures and organizations. And so that's our first step, or the next step for us. And we hope that it can really move us in a way that feels like we're taking some steps in the right direction and we're going towards healing.
Ashe, I want to acknowledge the Dr. Dina Thomas, who is one of our attendees, and I thank you very much for being here, Dr. Thomas. And I agree with your statement. I agree with your statement to the point that it actually compels the witnesses to act and do more than what I have generally seen when Black trauma and grief is displayed. And I mean, I literally had this happen to me. I went to see a play out in Seattle, and the Nina Simone piece. And afterwards, a white woman walked up to me and she grabbed my arm and she began to hold my hand. And the first thing she said to me was, "You people have been through so much pain." And I didn't need that to be her first response, right? I needed her first response to be, let me use my power and privilege to eradicating the systems that create the pain. I already know that, right? So doing the work is going to lead us to shifting in the theater department and at AFA, yes, as you mentioned here. If it's going to lead us to shifting our curriculums, great. If it's going to lead us to, I heard someone say here earlier, the changing the decision makers in the room, right? Great. If it's going to lead us to picking, seasons that are culturally competent and still accomplish the agenda of the educational mission of the department, I'm here for it. If it's going to help our colleagues treat Black faculty and faculty of color better, white colleagues treat Black faculty and faculty of color better, I'm all here for it. If it's not going to change those things, but simply just be slotted in the season for the sake of doing it so that the people can just stop it already. And then we go back to the way things were, I don't see the point.
Could we get all of our panelists back on stage or back on stage, back on screen as we close?
Thank you, Keaton. I'd like to read a quote from Audre Lorde's A Litany for Survival as we close. "When we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard, nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak." Thank you for joining us for this conversation. We hope you will join us again next week as our students and faculty continue to speak through movement in Reaching Out and Leaning In, featuring the Willam Mary Dance faculty and Orchesis Modern Dance Company. Have a good evening.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.